So when we talk about leveraging big data to support the transformation, we need to be able to make useful information out of those billion reads.
Welcome to the Smart Energy International podcast, your guide to innovation and trends in the global power and energy sectors.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Smart Energy International podcast. My name is Areti Daradimu. I am the editor of Smart Energy International, and I'll be your host. I would like to welcome my guests, Dan Garvey.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Dan Garvey. I'm the Managing Director of Sales and Marketing for PowerRunner. PowerRunner is a software company primarily serving the utility industry, but we also have clients in other IoT verticals. Our platform is a data virtualization layer with business applications such as forecasting, revenue analytics, and several others. But our primary focus has been the utility industry and serving utility since 2007 when we were formed.
And Kevin Walsh.
Hello, my name is Kevin Walsh, and I'm Industry Principal for Transmission, Distribution, and Smart Grids at Whyosisoft, now part of Aviva Group. My background has been with utilities for 25 plus years, ranging from working at a utility on demand-side management programs through software shops such as SAP, and now at Whyosisoft, been here for 12 years, really focusing on the PI system and the utilization of the operational data for utilities.
Together, we are going to discuss, among other things, how the use of AMI data could assist in providing situational awareness to grid ops. Welcome, Dan and Kevin, and thank you for taking the time to have this chat with me.
Thank you for having us today. Appreciate this opportunity to speak with your audience.
Hello, Areti, and thank you for having us today.
Dan, I would like to start with you. There are those that support the idea that customers only care about the cheapest, easiest, and safest solution. That customers are not really interested in viewing their changing energy patterns and analyze them. How would you respond to that?
It's a good question. Reminds me of a comment that my engineering professor in college used to always make, which is that students are like electrons. They take the path of least resistance. And, we could probably say that for consumers as well, right? Consumer economics, it pretty much leads to consumers wanting to find lowest cost, easiest transactions. So therefore, not too many people are paying much attention to, the ubiquitous energy bill that they get every month and essentially take it for granted that it's there. It was interesting, probably about 3-4 years ago, there was a study done here in the US that, the average consumer spends about 9 minutes a year worrying about their electric bill. But I do sense that there's a big change coming. Obviously, we're all aware of the social awareness around our carbon footprint and, the objectives that are being put forward by many different countries, pretty aggressive renewable objectives. And people are beginning to take a different look at their own footprint. They're beginning to consider the alternative energy technologies, such as solar and EVs, and understanding how they use energy. So I do see a trend that's, a change that's coming from the consumer. In the future, if we start to move to more transactional type of an environment where rates are, published hourly and more people are using these technologies, then undoubtedly there's going to be more attention given to their choices as consumers. But those choices are also going to have an impact on the utility. And we're beginning to see that now here in North America. There's a number of utilities that are experiencing a lot of operational problems due to the emerging what we call prosumer, because not only are they consuming energy, but they're producing energy. So with solar panels and batteries and EVs that can charge to the grid, all of this is changing the way in which distribution utilities need to manage the grid. And this is where the PowerRunner and Whyosisoft solutions sort of come together, utilizing that AMI data to be able to create situational awareness for the distribution operators so that we can ensure reliability of the system, but also gathering and presenting this data to the consumers so that they can make informed decisions. So there is a sea change coming in the consumer perspective about their energy usage on a regular basis.
Indeed, consumers are more involved and understand better that their choices have consequences. Hence, as you said, their transformation to prosumers, some of them. I couldn't agree more. Dan, you also mentioned AMI data. So, Kevin, I would like to come to you now and ask you, would you say that utilities might miss out if they only use AMI data to support billing or meter to cash?
I think the answer would be yes. And if you take a step back with that question, which was good, thank you for asking. If you think about, I don't want to belittle what the utilities, role and jobs are, but the goal of a utility is really, first of all, drive safety. Okay, safety both in and outside of the company, but also to keep the lights on and drive grid resiliency. And if utilities have invested in that smart meter for meter to cash, it's a large sum dollar ticket that they invested. They should look into other ways to deliver value from that big investment. So yes, meter to cash is important, but using the meter data to drive insights into the distribution grid is another high impact value that it brings to the owner of that data or the people who have access to it, which is typically the distribution utilities.
Dan, let me ask you, what additional data can utilities use other than AMI in order to increase grid resiliency and support new smart grid requirements for customers?
Well, good question. Is a lot of other data that the utilities are bringing in from both operational and commercial systems, and they're vital to supporting, if you will, the whole new ecosystem of the prosumer and actually ensuring the stability of the grid as well. So AMI combined with SCADA, GIS. SCADA is for those who are unfamiliar, supervisory control and data acquisition. The GIS, graphical information systems, and ADMS, automated distribution management systems, or advanced distribution management systems, are all key operational systems that maintain the grid. In utilizing AMI data to support the situational awareness downstream of these systems is vital. So joining them together into a common operational platform is really a big component of the Pi platform. Pi is generally ingesting all of this operational data now. So, as a sort of leader in the industry, is definitely in the utility space and other time series data industries, Pi is gathering all this data in sub-second intervals. So it's very rich data for operational control. Join that with other data sources, such as the commercial data sources across rate structures, or you could do solar tariffs and EV tariffs. And you can even join that with external data, such as weather data and real-time market pricing. And now you've got in what we call OT/IT solution, which is, operational data and information technology joined together to create a single source of truth. This enables two sides of the solution here, the essentially operational security of the grid by providing that situational awareness down to the grid operators. But then you also have the outward looking consumer facing information that they need to make real-time decisions on their actual selections of energy choices, both from a scheduling standpoint, but also from their choice of technologies.
And how important is the data coming from consumers themselves? Because there are a lot of, let's say, objections from consumer associations and from the European Commission when it comes to consumer data usage. What would you say to that? How would you tackle that problem?
Well, most data is anonymized in operational systems. Clearly, the commercial systems will have some of the pertinent attributes associated with the accounts. But from the perspective of an operational platform, we're mainly using that data to support the real-time operations of the system And it shouldn't be an issue in that regards, but I could see how people are concerned, but there are plenty of safeguards against that within the utility.
Yeah, and Dan, I'd like to add too that it's almost, from a consumer's point of view, it's a nameless profile. And that's from an operations point of view, you're interested in the load and the voltage, but there's no connection to the end customer per se. It's more like meter ID, and it's a faceless profile to the operators.
Yeah, thank you both very much for clarifying this, because this is a matter that concerns a lot our audience, our readers, both at Lead Europe and at Smart Energy International. I would like now to ask Kevin something. Kevin, do you think that is it due to latency or data integration issues or both that few utilities are extracting operational value from their AMI investments?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so the answer is actually both, and I actually probably would like to add one more, which is about finding the right technology to support this data set. This data set is unique from typical operational data. The latency is different, the volume is massive, so it has different characteristics. But there are utilities that are used to the challenge of AMI data, but there are others around the world that will be the first time they get their hands on this type of data set outside of their DMS or their SCADA system, because they just never had access. It's some parts of the world have retailers that own the meter and the data around that. So because of what's happening with the utility of the future and the unbundling and the decentralizing of the distribution grid, distribution utilities are getting access to that data. But I would also say that it's the sheer volume and the dynamic nature of the data that makes it unique. Most utilities want to, when they look at this data set, the distribution utilities want to jump right to the end and get right into the use cases and start extracting value if they have those use cases around this data set. But they skip over the most important part, which is the technical requirements to drive the high value use cases that they are thinking of. And also a very important thing, and it's probably a phrase that's overused, but not all technology is created equally, and not all IT solutions can solve OT requirements. So what I mean by that is, what we do as Whyosisoft and PowerRunner is that we bring together the best of breeds of technology, one that has 40 years of managing and ingesting this time series operational data, and that's all we focus in on, with another technology that really it's around data governance, and it also has the ability to virtually cube a variety of data sets together that is going to be required for those use cases around the AMI data and SCADA data. And being able to virtually cube data sets from GIS or CIS or the SCADA and other metering systems. And with the versioning and the challenges of high performance and the scalability that this data set requires, utilities are able to focus on extracting additional value from the data versus building and supporting an IT solution. So yes, the answer is, it's both, but it's also around the technology and making sure you start, with the proper technology versus building, customizing an IT solution around it.
Kevin, talking about technology, I think you used the key word, which is the proper technology, the right technology. So my question to you is the Whyosisoft technology the right one? Does it support the emerging smart grid ecosystem?
Maybe a little bias here, but absolutely. If I don't know if people are familiar with Whyosisoft and the Pi system, but it's been around for 40 years. The transmission and distribution customer sets that we have are global, and that one thing that they have is that time series operational data, and it's just growing. So with the proper database technology to handle all this real-time operational data is one thing, but also, as I mentioned, about the sheer performance and scalability, the data governance. We're pulling these two systems together to address a void in the industry. So as I mentioned too, grid resiliency in an earlier statement, with high demands for the DER integration and on the distribution grid, which Dan mentioned earlier, and the need to support DERs to play in the wholesale market, which is emerging, the smart meters and the data that they capture become very valuable to enable the future direction of the grid, which is ever expanding and ever growing. It's like a mini IIoT ecosystem.
So I see you're both very passionate about the topic. As an energy professional working in the industry for some decades already on a personal level, what makes you both particularly excited about the power of AMI data in the future of utilities? And Kevin, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad you picked up my passion for the industry and this topic we're talking about. As I mentioned earlier, I've been in the business for 25 plus years, and it kind of moved at a snail's pace. But when I hit OSIsoft about 12 years ago, it changed. The whole industry changed. Technology, policy, we're all coming together to create this perfect storm, and it's been exciting ever since. Rolling out AMI meters, just a meter to cash, getting technology involved. It's not just delivering electrons, but you're also bringing, high tech into the industry and digitalizing it. So it's been moving at, if we can say, warp speed from a utility perspective. And I think, the space that OSIsoft with its I want to say command on the operational data, and to be able to bring another technology like PowerRunner to the market to solve a challenge. It's a true challenge out there with a fully capable and tested solution. It really excites me to be in this market because it's, like I said, it's dynamic, it's changing, technology's coming in. So it's exciting time to be in the utility space today.
Dan, do you agree?
Yes, and to play off that, I would say it's, the most exciting time to be in an industry that for the last 30 years has really been pretty boring.
True
I
that.
shouldn't say, not totally boring. There's been some transitions over the years with deregulation and stuff like that. But, like I've said in my answers earlier, that, for 100 years, utility has been pretty much the same business model. And consumers were essentially just price takers. They now have a lot of options. The whole industry is in flux. And, let's face it, the industry itself is at the forefront of addressing a lot of the, global climate issues. So it is a very exciting time to be in this industry, and there are a lot of opportunities. And we do think that, the enabling technology, PowerRunner on Pi, is what the industry needs to meet a lot of these very ambitious objectives that are set out. So it's very exciting.
And I guess that passion made you also partner. So it's let's say you just fit well together. You have the same priorities. Is this why Whyosisoft and PowerRunner partnered? Kevin?
Yes, it's a very, it's two complementary technologies. So we at OSIsoft, as I mentioned earlier about the operational data, we just kept being pulled further. I'll call it downstream with the utilities. First, it was in power, then transmission, and then behind the ADMS or the SCADA systems in the distribution space. But once smart meters and line sensors started coming out, our clients were asking us, how can we help them? Not just manage the data. And, unfortunately, Pi doesn't do everything once it gets down to the ends of the distribution line because of the sheer volume and the required nature of being able to manipulate the data and the dynamic component of that nature. So partnering with a complementary technology to be able to deliver a solution and a complete solution to the distribution part of the grid was a perfect match for PowerRunner with its design based on today and where the future is going with utilities, and where you have the old school Pi and our technology being able to be robust around that operational data that's just growing. It was very complementary technology. And it was pretty easy to say, hey, we should partner.
You agree, Dan?
Right.
Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, like Kevin said, complementary technologies, and that we don't compete. Pi is the leading industry time series database, and PowerRunner is an application that extends and utilizes that time series data to support a lot of these high value use cases for utilities. I mean, we haven't got into a lot of the technology between the two companies, but from our standpoint, we deliver a lot of machine learning AI, and we leverage enormous amounts of granular data. And clearly with the Pi system, being the de facto standard for that time series data, it allows us to create forecasts that support utilities in near real time, giving them that situational awareness that they need. So there is this complementary component to the technologies, and it's working out very well and being well received by many of the Pi customers as well as PowerRunner customers.
Excellent. Coming a little bit back to what we discussed earlier about data, I would like to ask my final question to both of you. How do utilities leverage big data to support the digital transformation across the industry? Dan, if you would like to answer first.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. You know what? Digital transformation, I'd say there's two transformations occurring right now. In all honesty, there's, the consumer transformation. We talked about the prosumer. And this is also being spurred by some very ambitious renewable goals, as I mentioned earlier, that are being put forth by the countries around the world. And that prosumer consumer model is changing the way in which electricity flows across the 100-year-old distribution grid that was designed to be one directional. Now we have a bidirectional system in which consumers at one moment can be a load and at the next moment can be a generator. That creates a lot of operational problems for utilities. It also disrupts the century-old business model for utilities as well. So they've got to look at the way in which they've been raising revenue and sustaining the system over the last few decades. And obviously, as consumers, we need to be concerned about that. The utilities provide us an essential value, an essential service, and it's of high value for us to maintain that. So we need to understand how that's going to work out in the next few years. In the digital transformation, I say supports that consumer transformation and that business transformation that's ongoing. We need to be able to develop the systems that are ingesting all of this, as Kevin pointed out, millions, if not hundreds of millions of data points in hours across the system. We have one client right now that literally brings in 1 billion reads a day into our system. That is an enormous amount of data. So when we talk about leveraging big data to support the transformation, we need to be able to make useful information out of those billion reads. So how do you then, use this data to ensure grid fidelity, give the control room operators better visibility, better situational awareness down to the individual transformer? So how do you monitor the voltage on the system in 15-minute intervals to recognize, where you may have a pending problem? And no one's going to monitor that. You need to have the systems designed to essentially create alerts when we see a pending problem coming. And we need to be able to use the data to do that in a bidirectional system that's constantly shifting from load to generation. So, from a digital transformation standpoint, from a solution standpoint that we've created with Whyosisoft, we think this is what the utility needs. We know this is what the utility needs. We're beginning to see the adoption. It is essential for supporting this whole transformation that's going on with the smart grid and these renewable objectives, because we're not going to get there if we are essentially going to create physical disruption and reliability problems across the grid. So we really need to create a data platform that supports this changing distribution system and the essentially adoption of all these new technologies.
Yeah, Dan, and I'd like to add that the term big data, it's been around for 5+ years. It's an industry trend. And the interesting part about it, it's still growing. So big data is getting bigger data, so to speak, right? And that's just going to become a bigger challenge, right, for the utilities. So they need to really take a step back, look at it with fresh eyes, and understand the nature of the data that they're dealing with. It's not IT data. The other thing that comes to mind is that, you know, as you put more sensors out on the network, such as a smart meter or a sectionalizer or anything in the middle, you know, sensor creates data, but data doesn't always equal information. So as Dan kind of alluded to, you need to have the right systems in place to transform that data to derive information, and not just any information, but valuable information, and to be able to have a system that can correlate all the different unique data sets, levelize the latency of everything, to be able to work on it on a level plane, so to speak. It's critical, and it's a challenge out there. But big data, it's going to get bigger. Since it's becoming digital, it drives situational awareness. But it's also driving, what we can, the industry's kind of coining these days is the digital twin. Utilities should start moving away from manual, scheduled, to letting the system respond and the utility responding to what the system's telling you. And to be able to do that, you need to be able to have a solution that can correlate, align, and put it in the hands of the business to hear and listen to what the grid is saying, because it's only going to get louder when we start more prosumers coming on, more DER, and getting involved in the markets. It's just going to get louder, and the utilities need to be able to listen and extract value from that.
Kevin, Dan, thank you very much for sharing this valuable information with us, and thank you all for joining us on the Smart Energy International podcast. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Whyosisoft. For more podcasts, you can visit the Smart Energy International website on smart-energy.com. Be sure to tune in again soon for more conversations and insights into the things that really matter to our industry.